Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our May webinar, we've got Ofsted in today discussing the updates, and then also have a massive Q&A towards the end with our two inspectors. We'll be able to answer for everybody. Everybody's mics have been disabled, just because on this webinar we asked for questions before this webinar, which we sent over to Ofsted for them to be able to answer for us today. Thank you so much. We know this is obviously everybody's busy, and we wanted to also say thank you for the amazing questions that we've had. I think we've broken new records at Parenta this year with our amount of people registering for this webinar, as well as the amount of questions we've had. So you won't have an opportunity to be able to put your mic on, and also the chat facility has been disabled. However, if there are any questions that we haven't covered in this webinar today, please do feel free to email us at marketing@parenta.com after this webinar, and we'll be happy to be able to put that to Ofsted and try and get those answers back to you. Also, just to remind everybody that this webinar will be recorded, and that you also will be able to get a copy of this webinar sent to you via email, and where you can also claim your free CPD certificate. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Gail, who will be introducing our amazing HMR inspectors today. Thank you so much. Over to you, Gail.
Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We have a busy session ahead of us. So before our presenters do their presentation, I'll just introduce you to our speakers today. We're delighted to have Wendy, Ratcliff and Sam Sleeman-Boss here with us today. And before Wendy and Sam answer the questions that you've sent in, they'll be talking to us about the latest Ofsted updates and changes, key curriculum insights from the Best Start in Life research reviews, and the new inspection report cards, what they mean for you in your settings. So a little about our speakers. Wendy Ratcliff is one of His Majesty's inspectors, and she's Principal Officer for Early Years Education Policy at Ofsted. She was originally qualified as an early years practitioner and has extensive experience of inspection and regulation across a full range of early years provisions, including schools. Her role as Principal Officer for Early Education is focused on Ofsted's Best Start in Life strategic policy and the inspection of early education curriculum, including through the Education Inspection Framework and any potential changes for the future. Sam is one of Ofsted's early years regulatory inspectors, and she's a qualified early years practitioner and children's centre leader who started her career as a childminder. She has considerable experience in inspection and regulation of registered early years settings, and she now works in Ofsted's early education policy team. Her main focus is on Ofsted's Best Start in Life strategic policy, and she provides inspector insight and support to policy colleagues and inspectors on early education curriculum and the EIF as well. So without further ado, over to you, Wendy and Sam.
Brilliant. Thank you, Gail, and thank you, Adele, for inviting us to join you this morning. So we're delighted to join you. We have got a few slides that we're going to go through, and as we go through those slides, Sam, you're going to share the slides, aren't you? We'll just turn our cameras off while we go through the short presentation, and then we'll come back on screen for that Q&A session, and we have got lots of questions from you, so we're looking forward to answering those. Okay, so let's think about what we just want to cover with you this morning. So you'll know that we recently consulted on proposals to improve the way that we inspect education here at Ofsted. And the consultation was open for 12 weeks, and that consultation is now closed. So firstly, thank you to those of you who did respond. We are now in the process of evaluating those responses and making changes off the back of that. And we will publish the outcome of the consultation, including what we've changed as a result, in due course. But in the meantime, what we can do today is we can remind you about what we've proposed and what we're testing out on our visits. Because ultimately, we want inspections that look and feel different for everyone. We want a collaborative and transparent approach to inspection. We want to do our bit to help providers be places where children thrive and where there is high quality, inclusive education for every child. We want great outcomes for everyone, including those with SEND and those who are disadvantaged. So if we think about that for us as early years, we're talking about those who are in receipt of early years pupil premium funding. We want to be clear. We want to have clear and accessible reporting that helps everyone understand the quality of provision. And we want to build on the positive aspects of what we currently do in our current education inspection framework. So, for example, that focus on curriculum and on communication and language. So in the consultation, we propose that we conduct inspections in a way that promotes professional conversation and collaboration, that starts with the premise that everyone is working within the legal expectations and professional frameworks expected of them, in a way that understands and takes account for the unique context in which you work and have made the decisions that you've made for your children, and in a way that seeks to build a rounded picture of what you do, always seeking to find out what it's typically like to work, learn and care in your setting. And in a way that accepts that there will always be some aspects of what you do that are better and more developed than others. And we also want to promote a self-improving system that is inclusive of all and drives high and raising standards. And
So,
Sam, you're going to take us through this one, aren't you?
yeah, I will do. So, quality of education is now curriculum developing, teaching and achievement. Hopefully you'll have all seen that in the proposed toolkit that we consulted on. In regards to developing teaching, that's where we'll be looking at how leaders develop their staff. So for childminders, this is how they identify their own gaps in knowledge and what they do about it and the impact that this has on children. On inclusion, we'll be looking specifically at how a setting supports any children that have a barrier to learning and achieving. And welfare covers children's safety, their health, and well-being is more focused on their happiness and feelings. And the safeguarding evaluation area covers what is in the toolkit. So it's focused on making sure that children are cared for in a safe environment and are protected from harm and abuse. So you'll have seen in the consultation that we're proposing 8 evaluation areas and they're on the screen for you now.
Thanks, Sam. The other thing that we're proposing is around the proposed report cards, because in terms of our reporting, we want to make sure that we report using an accessible format that can be read on tablets and phones. We want to provide clear information for parents, carers and the sectors we inspect. We want to make sure our reports are easy to navigate so that people can find the information that's required. And we want to know what would be the most helpful way to design reports for different audiences. So as part of some of that, we've been holding a whole host of focus groups, as well as what people have responded to as part of the consultation. So thinking about our proposed toolkits, the proposal is that there will be 3 parts. So we'll have part 1, which will be the inspection framework. So the why bit, why we inspect. So an overarching document that sets out the legal basis, purpose and rationale for the inspection across all provider types, all of our remits. Then the second part will be an operating guide, the how. So information on how to inspect a provider and how the specific remit toolkit will apply in different settings. So how that published toolkit we published as part of the consultation, for example, the early years one, that will apply differently if you're a childminder versus if you're a group setting. The operating guide will be a technical guide for inspectors, and it will replace part 1 of the current inspection handbook. And there'll be 1 for each of the remits. And then there'll be the toolkit, the what. So what inspectors and provision leaders will use to encourage professional dialogue when considering the evaluation areas and reaching grades. And this will replace our current grade descriptors, which is currently in part 2 of our early years handbook. And there will be a toolkit for each of our remits. And each toolkit will comprise of a number of evaluation areas.
So,
Sam, do you want to take us through what this means for early years providers?
yeah, so some things about what we're going to continue doing, or what we propose to continue doing. So for early years providers, we'll continue to inspect the overall quality and standards of early years provision in line with the principles and requirements of the statutory framework for the early years foundation stage, so the EYFS. These standards aren't changing, so we will continue to do that. We'll also be continuing to focus on priorities such as the quality of adult interactions, and as Wendy said, the importance of communication and language, and keeping children safe and happy. We'll continue to report on what it's like to be a child at their early years setting, and we'll continue to focus on the priorities, actions, and impact of settings. And the new evaluation areas that we showed on a previous slide replace the current overall effectiveness grade. Now, we're proposing to introduce something called a context call, and that's where inspectors will gather information about the settings context, their strengths and areas for development, and the curriculum overview, as well as agree areas of inspection focus with leaders. We're wanting to have increased professional dialogue between inspectors and leaders, and for that to be a priority moving forwards. So every provider will be invited to nominate a senior member of staff to work closely with the inspector throughout the inspection. And you might have heard it referred to as the nominee, but as you know, in early years settings, we have the nominated person. So we really see this person as the person who knows the setting and the children best, and they'll be invited to be with the inspector for as much as they can or want to be throughout the inspection, so that they're hearing and seeing what the inspector is hearing and seeing. We're also proposing to introduce an evaluation area on inclusion. And as Wendy said, in early years, this includes a focus on children with SEND and those who are disadvantaged, which means children who are eligible for early years pupil premium, and also anyone who the setting deemed to be vulnerable for any reason. Now, the Big Listen gathered the views of over 4,000 children who ranked support for children with SEND among their top 5 inspection priorities. And that's one reason why we're proposing to make inclusion a key focus of all inspections, because like those children that responded to the Big Listen, we really want to understand what leaders are doing to create a culture in which every child feels safe, welcomed, and valued. So it's a brand new evaluation area that we'll look at in its own right. However, the experience and outcomes for these children will also be a golden thread that runs through all evaluation areas and every aspect of provision. So we've put inclusion front and centre of our renewed framework. We know how important it is for those with SEND or children who are disadvantaged to have the best possible chance in life and the best possible outcomes. So the toolkits across all remits set out how we propose to hold providers to account for ensuring inclusive education. And as I said, this includes strong outcomes for disadvantaged children, those with SEND, and those who leaders have identified as being particularly vulnerable, taking into account that the factors that make a child vulnerable may vary across different settings and at different times in their lives. So we'll really want to hear from settings who they consider those children to be. Now, we're aligning the renewed framework more closely to the EYFS, which we feel will enable us to undertake our dual role as regulator and inspectorate more effectively. And this should give clarity to the sector around our expectations. By aligning our renewed framework more closely to the EYFS, which are the standards set by the DfE that all providers must adhere to, we're making it clear to you all in the sector that we're not expecting anything more than that.
Thank you so much, Sam, and thanks, Wendy. That was good. And I know, like I said, we have never had so many questions. So I'm going to kick off with the questions, and we've got about a good 45 minutes to try and get them through them. So I'll start with this one, and you guys can just decide who you want to answer. So the first question we had was, what will the changes to the inspection mean for SEND, and how inspectors will look at this on an inspection? What questions would you have for a specialist SEND setting?
So we've been really clear throughout the consultation that we propose to focus on children who are disadvantaged, those that the setting deemed to be vulnerable, and those children with SEND. And I just talked about the reasons for that. And just as a reminder, when we're talking about disadvantage, we're meaning children in receipt of additional funding, and that includes early years pupil premium. Yeah, so we will ultimately, we're charged with finding out what it's like to be a child in their early years setting. So that's not going to change. But we'll want to know that leaders and practitioners know who these children are, that key persons know children really well and can talk about their journey and talk about the progress that they've made in the setting. And I suppose that doesn't differ really on whether you're a specialist SEND setting or a setting who is inclusive to children with SEND.
Because ultimately it's about knowing your children, and you're best placed to know your children.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Our next question is, can we still display our good sign in our nursery now that the ratings have changed? Are ratings changing for childminders too, and how will this work?
Okay, so the answer, the simple answer to that one, I'll take this one, Sam, is that yes, settings will still be able to continue to display the previous inspection outcome until the point that they're inspected under the new arrangements. And we'll communicate changes in due course about that. And changes that we make to early years inspections will apply to all those registered with us on the early years register. So that will include childminders, that will include day nurseries, that will include preschools and out of school provision as well.
Yeah. Right, thank you so much. This is quite an interesting one. I'm quite excited to hear your response to this one. What are your thoughts on the new experience-based routes for level 3s?
Okay, so I think I'll start with this one. So the first thing that I would suggest that we encourage you to do is to read our recent report on getting it right from the start, which is a report for children from birth to 2 years, where we looked at how practitioners work with the youngest children. And one of the things that report makes really clear is the important link between qualifications, experience and knowledge and the quality of early years provision. And interestingly, recently our Chief Inspector, Martin Oliver, he referred to this change in policy during a speech that he made at the Nursery World Business Summit, and we can also provide the link to that. We know that the Department for Education will add the experience-based route to the EYFS from September. And of course, we inspect in line with the principles and requirements of the EYFS, and that aspect of things won't change. But what we don't do is we don't use the EYFS, those requirements, as a compliant checklist. But what we do is we do collect data on qualifications while on inspection, and we'd be interested to see how the working of that policy in terms of experience-based route comes into play.
Okay,
Great,
brilliant.
Thanks, Wendy. Can Ofsted come out into the community to give presentations like this one?
Sam, do you want to take that one?
Well, that's simple because we have been doing it. So yes, definitely. We really feel that this is something that we've been prioritising over the last, well, definitely since the pandemic, and will continue to do so as we move forward. So we're currently working on our plans of how we engage with you all once the findings from the consultation are published. We do really appreciate the time that we get to be out in your communities, talking to you and engaging with you outside of inspection. And I'm sure many of you will have seen either or both of us at various expos or Nursery World Show, for example, or delivering our Best Start in Life curriculum roadshows. So absolutely, yes, you will continue to see us out in your communities, and you are also very welcome to request speakers from Ofsted on the website. So there's a form to be completed if you're holding any events where you would like somebody to come and talk about our policies.
It is something that we definitely think is beneficial, and it's a way of us communicating our messages and having that opportunity to speak to an inspector outside of inspection as well. So yeah, definitely something, Sam, we're going to continue.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. Are there any updates or vetting malicious communication or complaints?
So
Sam, I think that's another one for you.
Thanks, Wendy. Well, I think firstly I'll say that the difficulty with this is that there's no way of us knowing if information that we receive is malicious or not. And we do take our role in safeguarding children extremely seriously. So we obviously have to risk assess any information that we receive, and then we act accordingly and proportionately to ensure that children are safe. And when we find providers are meeting requirements of the EYFS, we don't take any unnecessary action. Equally, if we find that there are breaches to EYFS requirements, then we must take action if the provider has not done so themselves. So yeah, it's a difficult one to answer because we can't assume that the information that we receive is malicious, I suppose.
And we can't unknow what we've been told, and therefore that's why we have that risk assessment basis process in place, so that we can consider all information that comes our way.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Wendy. What evidence does the inspector want to see for how our curriculum is embedded?
Shall I take this one again?
Yeah.
Okay. So well, if the curriculum is embedded, and I'll talk about this from an inspector's perspective, we'll see practitioners consistently teaching the curriculum, prioritising babies and children's communication and language, so having daily story times, developing children's love of books. They'll know their children really well, as we've already said, and they'll be focusing on interacting with those children who need it most. So children who are disadvantaged, those who are vulnerable or have SEND. It's embedded when all staff understand child development, they know what it is that they want all children to know and be able to do, and when they're choosing the most effective ways to teach children these things. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Wendy.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and it's through that inspection process that, you know, as inspectors, we're finding out what it's like to be a child in this place, and, you know, seeing that curriculum, seeing it in action basically through those key inspection activities that we do.
Yeah.
Right, thank you so much. This question is about private schools. What can you clarify about inspections of nurseries attached to private schools, and what age groups get inspected by Ofsted and not an ISI?
Okay, I can take that one. So interestingly, people may not be necessarily aware of this unless you are providing the early years provision at an independent school, but we register and inspect EY provision at independent schools, as we do at all types of schools, and there's guidance published on when schools need to register with us, and there's lots of details about that. But actually, when a school decides to take children under the age of 2, that's when they need to register their early years provision with us. And the Independent Schools Inspectorate, ISI, is approved to inspect on our behalf at some independent schools, but we remain the regulator, so we may also inspect in some instances. So we work really closely with ISI, and there is more information available on our website about regulating and inspecting association independent schools that has an early years registration, and we're happy to share that link with you after the webinar, if that's helpful.
Definitely. Thank
Great.
you, Wendy.
Thanks, Wendy. Can you provide details regarding the new early years inspection framework for private, voluntary and independent settings, and if or how this will affect funding?
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, because as Sam has said in the when we were going through the presentation, those evaluation areas are it's proposed that that will replace the overall effectiveness grade. And we know, don't we, that the overall effectiveness grade potentially has an impact on funding arrangements, and it's local authorities who oversee those funding arrangements. And it's actually the Department for Education who are responsible for the legislation around entitlement funding, and they then provide the local authorities with the guidance about how to use that information that we share following an inspection that might trigger the local authority to have that quality conversation with a provider in their local authority. So decisions around funding arrangements sit with local authorities, and we're in conversation at the moment with the DfE to update this process in order for them to update that particular guidance. So there'll be more to come on that.
Great. Can you explain what you would like to hear and see on the learning walk? Would you expect a manager to deliver this by themselves or with involvement from other leaders within the setting?
Basically, during the learning walk, we want to know what you want children to know and be able to do by the time they leave your setting and why. And I mean, it's as simple as that. That's what we mean by understanding your curriculum overview. And the learning walk will usually be led by the leader. But if there are others who know more detail or can talk more at length about what happens in the room that they work in, so for example the baby room leader, and you want to involve them in the learning walk, then that's absolutely fine as well.
Great, thank you. This one's about qualifications. So how can you use a member of staff if their qualifications didn't check out? I know, for example, I know it's one lower than their original, but do they need a certificate to show that one lower grade? For example, what if they just did a level 3 and not a level 2, so they have no certificate for the lower one?
So I think there's quite a lot to unpick there, and Sam, I'm not entirely sure I understand what's being asked there, but it is for the provider to use the requirements that are set out in the DfE's EYFS to determine those qualification requirements and ratios, and whether staff can be included as qualified or not. But I guess this potentially could be referring to whether or not a level 3 is considered full and relevant against the DfE's list, and if that didn't check out as such, then as a leader provider of your setting, you'll need to determine where else that person can be included within the overall ratios within the setting. Sam, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, as an inspector, I would just say that, you know, when we make the notification call, we do ask about levels of qualification and the number of staff you have, and we do record that in our evidence base. But we don't go round like counting staff, counting children at the inspection.
Counting heads.
Yeah, checking who's got what qualification with which number of children while we're on inspection, unless we have concerns about the quality of what's being provided, and then we might want to ask questions, dig a bit deeper, understand from leaders how they've made the decisions that they've made. So yeah, I suppose that's all I'd say on that.
Yeah,
we don't use the EYFS as a checklist.
Okay, quite a comprehensive answer there. Thanks so much, you guys. Do Ofsted actually need to see planning, or are they happy if the person who's walking around or in the setting can actually explain what's happening in the moment planning, or what is it that you guys want to see?
So I think this is a really important one to sort out some misconceptions potentially, because we're not asked to see any form of written planning as part of the inspection process, but we will hold discussions with you about what you want your children to know and be able to do. and then we will observe what you're teaching and what children are learning. If you've got written plans and you want to use them to aid these discussions, then that's completely up to you, because it's not a memory test. If you use any particular methods, such as in the moment planning, you can explain to the inspector what you mean by this, because what you interpret as in the moment planning might be different to the inspector's own understanding, or how the setting down the road interprets in the moment planning. So that's why those conversations are really important.
Great, thank you, Wendy. Will Ofsted want to speak to kitchen staff on an inspection?
There's some really
Sam,
interesting
do you want
questions.
to? Yeah.
So we might want to talk to kitchen staff if it's relevant to the areas of inspection focus, or if the kitchen staff particularly want to speak with the inspector. But I think this is where we can sometimes be challenged around consistency, and I'd say no two inspections are the same. So just because we speak to kitchen staff in one setting doesn't mean that we'll speak to kitchen staff in another setting. It's really all about the context of the setting, what the areas of inspection focus are, and where what it is that we're seeing and hearing takes us in the inspection as to who it is that we talk to and what we talk about.
Thank you. This next one's quite interesting, actually. A lot of the settings, certainly that we deal with, even when our assessors goes in, have a no phone policy within their settings, and they have to leave it at the door or in reception or whatever. The question is, if we have a no phone policy in our setting, can I enforce that Ofsted leave their phones in the office?
Yes.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, short and sweet. Thank you.
Thank you. What expectations does Ofsted have regarding staff training and professional development in early years?
I think if we think about the requirements of the EYFS sets out the requirements around staff training and professional development, and of course those requirements are set by the Department for Education. So I think it's kind of like, in terms of we don't as such have expectations, but what we're interested in is how settings decide around their professional development for their staff, based on strengths and what they've identified as strengths and areas for improvement. And again, it's kind of like going back to the EYFS. Sam, did you want to say any more on that?
Well, I think what's more important about that is the impact that the professional development has on children, particularly those who are disadvantaged, those who are vulnerable, and those with SEND. That's the important thing. So how leaders are identifying where weaknesses are, what they do to address it, and the impact that those decisions have on the children who need it the most.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Right, this next question, Sam, you mentioned something about this earlier, and that was about consistency. And the question goes, how does Ofsted actually ensure consistency in the early years inspection?
And that is something, Sam, you've already touched on, isn't it? And I think it's important that we think about, actually, and Sam, you also mentioned in the presentation around the big listen that we did last year. And actually, one of the findings from our big listen and our commitments is, and one of our 7 C's is around consistency. And we know that no 2 inspections will be the same, because no 2 early years settings are the same. Each early year setting is unique, therefore each inspection will be unique, but the consistency part of it is through the application of our inspection policy. So around the application of our inspection methodology and those observations that inspectors will undertake as part of the inspection. And it is something that we've given a commitment to, that we want to make sure that we ensure the consistency of that application across our inspections. And I think we're doing that in a number of ways. For example, since our the appointment of our new chief inspector back in January last year, we now have the Ofsted Academy, which is the place where all our training sits for our inspectors, and that is another way of being able to provide that consistency. The other thing that we've done recently, just last week, I want to say, is we've made a commitment to be open and transparent about the training that we provide for our inspectors, because again, that's a way of us getting consistency. And last week we published the training that we provided for our early years workforce at their November conferences, all based on Best Start in Life. And we're not publishing that for settings to use as training, but for the purposes of being open and transparent.
I'll just say one more thing about how we ensure consistency, and that's through how we treat providers and practitioners when we're on inspection, no matter what the judgment. So it's not always going to be that you know, people are pleased with the outcome of their inspection, but that doesn't mean that we don't all treat each other with professionalism, courtesy, empathy and respect.
Yeah, really good point, Sam. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. That kind of leads us on to the next question, actually. And we're not sure if this is regarding after a judgment or grading or actually at time of inspection, but is there any support for parents regarding complaints after an inspection?
I think that depends on what that question is actually getting to. I mean, we can talk a little bit about how we gather the views of parents through inspection. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure what it relates to. In terms
we have
of
got published complaints process, and if parents are concerned, there's ways that they can, you know, make a complaint about a setting or let us know some information because it's concerning to them. Or there is also the complaints process that we have where a setting wants to make a complaint following an inspection. So all of that information is published.
I suppose they would get, you know, when we respond to complaints, we do speak, well, we write to the provider who's made the complaint following the inspection, and it will be for them then to communicate with parents and provide any support
share that
is
information.
needed.
Yeah.
And also to work with their local authority if they feel that there's any particular support that's needed.
Thank you. I think that covers both. Thank you.
How does Ofsted ensure that its inspection framework fairly evaluates early years settings with diverse cultural approaches to child development, particularly in multicultural environments? That's quite a mouthful, by the way, to read that slowly.
I'm not sure if I know what diverse cultural approaches to child development are, but what I will say is that all early years providers registered on the early years register must adhere to the statutory requirements of the EYFS, and because our inspection framework is underpinned by that, inspectors shouldn't be biased towards any particular approach, like that's towards or against any particular approach, but approaches must be in line with the EYFS, and inspectors ultimately will report on how effective any approaches are on children's progress and their achievement, particularly those children who are disadvantaged, vulnerable, or children who have SEND.
It's an interesting question, isn't it? Because I think it's one of those ones where quite often there's misconceptions around, you know, Ofsted have a preferred approach to things. Well, actually, no, we don't. You know, the teaching methods and those approaches that individual settings choose is down to individual settings within the confines of the EYFS, and on inspection we want to find out how effective they are and the impact that that's having for children.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. What steps is Ofsted taking to support early years providers in improving quality and meeting inspection standards, especially in areas with limited resources or staff training opportunities?
I think what's really important here is we do at Ofsted, we recognise the challenges that the sector are facing. and some of those challenges around recruitment, some of those challenges around releasing staff for training, etc. And as part of our commitment through our Best Start in Life research, our strategic priority for Best Start in Life, we've done the Best Start in Life research review, and also undertaken curriculum roadshows, because we wanted to play our part in helping settings have that information about the conception of quality and some of those key messages that we found from that research review. All of those things were available on our website, and the roadshows that we've done are now recorded. The communication and language ones are on YouTube. And I think it's, through the inspection process, inspectors will be interested in how you're supporting the CPD, that professional development of your staff, but how you decide to do that is for you. But I guess as well, Sam, there's something there, isn't there, about us being out and about in the communities and undertaking some of those speaking events that we do, so that people have that opportunity to speak to us outside of inspection.
Yeah, and we hear really great things as well, feedback at these events. And just to give you an example, we had a leader who came up to us not so long ago, who told us that they'd been to our communication and language curriculum roadshow, because these resources are all out there for you to access. And our inspectors have been trained in understanding the Best Start in Life research review. So they know what we expect in terms of high quality education and care, and that's what they're looking for when they come out on inspection. And this leader told us that following the roadshow, they went back to their setting, they rethought their approach to developing children's communication and language, put everything in place that they felt needed to change, and at their next inspection they got outstanding. So we do hear really great impact when settings are able to be reflective, when they are able to either read or watch or come and out and to one of our events that we do deliver, and hear the messages, and be able to make meaningful change, and focus and prioritise the right things for the children that they're caring for at their setting.
Right,
We also, I want to just give another example if I can.
Oh, you're going to give another one. Go on then.
Well, it's about my YouTube playlist, because we had another provider, or it was a leader, a manager, a new manager, who said that their inspection was imminent, and their staff were really anxious about the inspection, and what could they do to support them in being confident. And so I signposted them to the YouTube playlist where we talk about different aspects of inspection. And the next thing I knew, I saw on LinkedIn that they'd had their inspection, and it had all gone really well, and the staff were really confident, and they'd said that the playlist had really helped their staff to understand what to expect, and it was almost like that fear of the unknown,
and help to put them at ease.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
just
I'm
to say to
expecting my
everybody as
views.
well.
I'm expecting my views to go up after this, by the way.
She wants to go viral.
I can see. Yes, I'm going to have to start counting how many times you're plugging this playlist. So just also to let everybody else know that Wendy has kindly agreed that we will also include the link to their resources for everybody in the post-webinar email that you'll receive. So don't worry if you're not writing everything down. We'll also share all those resources links for you guys. So the next question is, when you register as a new setting, how long is it until you actually will be visited by Ofsted?
Okay, so let me just take that one. That one's quite an easy one to answer. So if this is referring to when do we carry out the registration visit, once you put an application in, then that's usually within 12 weeks of submitting the application. But if it means when do we inspect following registration, then that's within 30 months of registration.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. What impresses you most about settings on an inspection? Is there anything that particularly tends to make a setting stand out to you? And I know you've alluded to a couple of things earlier.
this is a really difficult question, because what is right and impressive in one setting is not right and impressive automatically in another setting. And so as an inspector, for me, it's where settings know their children really, really well, and they are doing what is right for those children. They understand their unique context. They know what their experiences are outside of the setting. They know the families, to be able to meet those children's needs, and do what's right for those children at the right time. And yeah, that's what I'd say.
And I think as well, there's something there, isn't there, that, you know, and through some of those proposals that we've recently consulted on, we also want to help continue to kind of raise standards through the use of toolkits that could be used by settings as a self-improvement tool in between inspections. But ultimately, I think this is a good place to sort of, like, you know, say that, and yeah, just be clear about that. If you're doing what's right for children, if you're doing what's right for your children, then you're doing what's right for Ofsted.
Great. This next question leads into the same, and I know you alluded to that earlier, Wendy, about the unknown and the fear factor, which, you know, hopefully with this today will help as well alleviate some of that. But this question is about a manager that has ADHD. Is this something that they could be questioned about by Ofsted, and could this actually affect their job?
Sam, do you want to talk about reasonable adjustments?
Yeah, this is something that's really close to my heart, being about equality. So we will always ask if there are any reasonable adjustments that we need to make on inspection. So the inspector must ask leaders during the notification call if there are any reasonable adjustments that are needed to be made, either for the leader or for any staff during the inspection, so that we're able to meet our equalities duties. If the leader tells us that they have ADHD, then the inspector should be asking what reasonable adjustments they need to make to be able to support the leader during the inspection. And I just want to reassure folk that having ADHD is not a reason for an inspector to be concerned about a person's suitability to carry out their role effectively. That's just not on its own anything that should cause us any concern.
And that also goes back to those behaviours, doesn't it, Sam, that, you know, our inspectors are required to work towards as part of their role.
So don't, if you are a leader who does have ADHD, you know, it is your right to not share that with the inspector. But if your ADHD, because ADHD is different for every single person, if your ADHD means that the inspector could do something different to be able to support you during the inspection, and you feel able to share it with the inspector, please do, because we're there to work with you, and yeah, meet I suppose your needs.
That's a really good answer. Thank you, Sam. Could you tell us more about how the new telephone learning walk will work? What else is discussed on the phone call before the inspection?
Okay, one, so yeah, I can take this one.
Oh, you can take it. Go on.
Oh, I can, well,
go on. But don't fight over it.
No, we don't want to fight over questions. So what we are proposing to introduce is a context call, which is, and we've been testing some of this on some of the visits that we've been doing. And this is a call that we are proposing would be around half an hour conversation with the leader of the setting. And the aim of the call is for the inspector to understand the context that the setting is working in, including what makes it unique, the children who attend, and that kind of thing. Inspectors will also want to hear what the leader feels are the setting's strengths and any areas for development that they might be working on, and what their priorities are and any action that they've taken since the last inspection. Inspectors will also want to know what the setting wants all children to know and to be able to do, that curriculum overview, and we want inspectors to determine and agree those areas of inspection focus with leaders, and so that inspection feels more collaborative, because currently inspectors determine those areas of inspection focus by themselves, and we want to make sure that process is much more collaborative. Sam, did you want to add to that?
No, I think you've covered it, Wendy.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think we covered some of this, but I'll just ask this question. Can you explain how Ofsted assesses the quality of education and staff performance on the day of actually in the inspection happening?
I'll let you do this one, Sam.
Okay, Wendy's going to let me. Okay, so first thing to say is that we're tasked with finding out what it's typically like for children at their early years setting. Not what just happens on the day of the inspection, but we do use obviously what we see and hear on the day of the inspection to understand what it's typically like for children there. And we do that mostly through observations, so we can see how staff interact with children and how children respond, how practitioners teach children, and the impact that this has on children's learning. And as we've said, we've discussed the curriculum with leaders and staff. So just to give an example of this, it might be that leaders tell us, for example, during the learning walk, that they want all children to routinely say please and thank you by the time they leave their setting. So in our observations, we'll see staff modelling this with the younger children. And then we'll see the impact of this when older children are demonstrating this and that they've learned it and that they've remembered it and they're routinely using this language. So it sounds too simple, but maybe that's because it is, and we don't need to overcomplicate things any more than they already are.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to, doesn't it, having the confidence to do what you do day in, day out, and don't do anything different because the inspector calls. And if you're doing what's right for your children, then you're doing what's right for Ofsted.
Yeah, and if you do what you're normally doing, what's right for the children at the setting for the inspection, then everything will feel routine. Staff will be confident with what it is that they're doing. They'll understand why they're doing any activities that they're doing. Children will be used to these ways of teaching. They will be used to the staff that are at the setting, and this will all be observable through their behaviours, their attitudes to learning, and their emotions and their relationships with the staff. That's how we can tell that it's typical at the setting.
Fantastic, thank you. I think this one's a fairly quick one. If a nursery requires improvement, does that mean they can't accept new children into the setting?
Again, this goes back to that funding question we had a bit earlier, because the funding decisions sit with local authority. So no, but the local authority may make a decision which mean the setting will not receive funding for new children. But again, that's down to it, you know, that's down to local authorities to decide.
Thank you.
If the capacity for a room is 29, but there are 39 children in the room, how should we ensure compliance with regulations and maintain child safety while also meeting the child's needs? I'm getting all the difficult questions, I think.
I'm going to give that one to Sam.
Don't give me any maths questions to work out. So just to go back to what I said before, we don't go around the setting counting children and staff unless we have concerns that children's needs are not being met. It's not like the old days when we used to have that wheel on a stick that we used to go around measuring the space requirements and how many people are in the room. We don't do that. It's for you to decide how you use the space available to you in line with the requirements of the EYFS, and obviously taking into account the ages and needs of the children attending, and remembering that, you know, staff themselves take up space within a room, don't they? So it's for you to sit back, observe what is happening are children's needs being met? Can they develop the skills and knowledge that you want them to be able to develop while they're at your setting with the decisions that you're taking?
Great, thank you. How long can an inspector, I think, how long can an inspector question one member of staff continuously with no breaks?
I think this is quite a straightforward one, because there is no limit to how long an inspector could be having a discussion with a member of staff for, because that's really going to depend on what that discussion's about. But having said that, the majority of our evidence comes from observing the interactions between staff and children. So long discussions with staff are unnecessary. But if anyone does feel like they need a break from a discussion with an inspector, or they feel they have been spoken to for an excessively long period of time, then they should raise that with the inspector. Sam, did you want to say any more on that?
No, I think that's it. I think that's it. Don't be afraid to say to the inspector, you know, we've been talking for a really long time. I need to get back to the children, or I need to take a break, or I can't remember the answer, what it is that I want to say in response to that question. Can you ask it to me again later, or can I come back to you? Inspectors should be being reasonable and allowing you to be able to do that. It's not a memory test, as Wendy said as well earlier. You know, treat the inspector how you would treat anybody who you were, you know, wanting to raise something with. If we were, you know, taking too long to speak to you about anything. I mean, I don't.
Go on, Sam.
Go on, Wendy. No, you go.
I was going to say, I think there's also that we sometimes hear as well, that we've heard when we've been out and about, that actually sometimes I think, oh, I wish I'd told the inspector that. And actually, well, go and tell the inspector that. You know, if you've had a conversation and you think afterwards, oh, I do wish I would have told them about, you know, how well so-and-so's doing in their learning in a particular area or something, then, you know, please do go back and find the inspector. It is about having, you know, working collaboratively together and having that respect for each other.
Yeah. We have the opposite as well sometimes. Sometimes we don't get round to talk to staff who wanted to speak to us. So, you know, if there are staff who particularly want to speak to us, please let us know, because, you know, we're not mind readers and we only have a certain amount of time to complete the inspection in. We don't want to be at settings for an excessively long period of time unless we have to be there. So, you know, we need to see what we need to see, and once we've done that, then we want to get out of your way so that you can focus again on the children who are the most important thing there.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Will the inspection framework be updated following the consultation, and when will this be available to providers?
So yes, the inspection framework will be updated, because actually what we are doing at the moment is we are considering all the responses to the consultation, and also all the findings we had from some visits that we've done, but also a whole range of focus groups as well. So it's likely that there will be changes to the proposed toolkit based on the responses, but we're not yet in a position to say when that will be available to providers. As you can imagine, there are a lot of responses and a lot to consider, and we want to make sure that we get this right, but we will make sure that there's plenty of time we will make the changes available in plenty of time for the start of any renewed inspection framework.
Right.
Thank you. For those settings that are due their first inspection very soon, but before the changes that are coming in September, can we defer our inspection until the new system is in place?
So what we've said that the renewed framework will be in place in the autumn. So confirmation around that will come in due course. But actually, in terms of, there is a deferral policy, and settings can request a deferral, but waiting for a renewed framework isn't something that is listed and a reason for deferral. If an inspection's due and there is no reason for it to be deferred in line with the deferral policy, then it will need to go ahead under the education inspection framework as it is now.
Okay. Under the new system, is there going to be an overall grade or will there be a grade for each of the 8 areas?
I think we've covered this, haven't we? That there isn't going to be an overall grade. I think, you know, that's something that schools have already implemented and will be following suit. That we have proposed 8 evaluation areas for which there will be a grade for each, apart from safeguarding, which will be met, or safeguarding standards which will be met or not met. And we need to await the final outcome of the consultation to know for sure what those will be.
Okay.
I think we've covered this as well, but I'm going to ask it anyway in case either of you would like to add to it. What documentation does Ofsted expect to see during an inspection?
Sam's got a short film on a playlist for this, haven't you, Sam?
Yep, so there is a short video about this in the playlist, but we must see records relating to DBS in group providers, and we must also discuss the arrangements for paediatric first aid, and that means that we might want to see certificates in relation to this, but not always. And in our inspection handbook, we've got a list of the other documentation that we might want to see, but please don't get folders of documentation ready for us because it's likely that we won't want to see anything else. Everything that we usually get is from discussions and observations.
Right. Gail, can you do the next question? So the question I've got is we've answered about fairness and inspection already. So can you just do the next one, please?
Yes, of course. As a practitioner, sorry, how will inspectors, will inspectors assess the effectiveness of providers' safeguarding policies and procedures?
Okay, so I can take that one. So this is done through those observations and discussion with leaders, staff and parents. We use an identify, help and manage model and that focus. And what this means is that we want to know how you identify children in need of help or any concerns you might have. About adults, what you do to support children to be safe and how you manage the process for reporting any concerns to ensure that you're keeping children safe, all around that safeguarding culture. And there's, you know, information about that in the early years inspection handbook.
Great. Thank you.
As a practitioner working in a daycare setting, or a nursery, what strategies do Ofsted expect me to use in supporting children's learning and development in line with the EYFS framework?
Sam, do you want to do this one?
I suppose we don't have a set of expectations of how practitioners support children's learning and development, although, as Wendy said, we published what research tells us about what high quality early education looks like in our Best Start in Life research review series. How you teach children is a decision for you in the context of your setting and the children who attend. What we're interested in is how effective this is and the impact that it has on children's progress, particularly those who are disadvantaged, vulnerable or have SEND.
Right.
It's not very helpful, is it? That the answer to that question.
No, but you know what it does highlight is the misunderstanding of what, you know, and the concern comes across in some of these questions. And actually, you guys, the answers that you've given actually puts a lot of those fears at bay. So, which has been great today. So hopefully that answers the same for everybody else as well. Sorry, Gail.
That's okay. How can I assess and track children's progress and what is expected in terms of sharing information with parents and carers?
Okay, so I think this is another one where it kind of like is kind of like more of a, it depends on, you know, your approach and how you decide to do this. But actually, we know that when practitioners know their children really well, they know what their experiences are outside of the setting, what they knew and what they could do when they started at the setting, what they know about that child now and where they're taking them on that journey. And finding that information is through those interactions rather than standing back and observing. And I think if we think about the DfE's EYFS, it sets out what is expected in terms of sharing information with parents and children's learning. So there is the 2-year progress check, of course, that is a requirement, and the information parents need to be able to support their child's learning at home as well. And there's some of those things that we have conversations about with you on inspection. Sam, did you want to say any more on that?
I think it really requires, to be able to do those things, it really requires practitioners to have a good knowledge of child development and also a good knowledge of their settings curriculum, so that when they're interacting with children routinely, they're able to build on what children already know and are able to do.
Yeah.
Right. Regarding the new report cards you've mentioned, this person has said they've seen the word secure being reviewed. Is that the case?
So I think what we can say is we're in the process of reviewing what's been said across all remits through the consultation process. And there will be changes we make based on feedback, because it's a consultation and we were consulting on proposals. And when any decisions have been made, these will be communicated across our sectors.
Okay.
Thank you. What is, you did cover some of this earlier in the presentation, but what is the rationale behind a 5-point scale system and the 8 assessment areas?
Sam, do you want to take that one?
So I suppose it's about us being more nuanced in our evaluation of a setting's strengths and where it has more to do. We want to be able to say very clearly what aspects of a setting are stronger than others and report on this, so that parents can make informed decisions about what's important to them and their child.
But I guess, Sam, is it also something about what we heard from the kind of big listen as well, wasn't it? That the impact of that one-word judgment that has on well-being, settings, including kind of like funding arrangements, and those kind of things as well. So yeah, changes for the better, I guess.
Right.
Thank you.
What key elements of the new Ofsted inspection do I need to prepare my team for? Any advice how to prepare the team would be great.
I'm going to make a start on this by saying that there is nothing that providers need to prepare for. There's nothing to practice in terms of an inspection. Our intention is that our inspections are collaborative and focus on the children who need the most help to be ready for their next stage in education. And once we've finalised and the new framework is published, we'll have a wide range of ways to communicate this with the sector about those changes and what that means for inspection. But ultimately, I think we'd say, wouldn't we, Sam, continue doing what is right for children. And if you and your staff haven't read the Best Start in Life research review series or watched some of the communication and language curriculum roadshows, for example, then we would encourage you to do so.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Under the new system, what will happen if a setting is found to be in the bottom category on the new scale?
So as I say, we're still considering what the sector's told us about the grades through the consultation. So we'll let you know more about that when we are in a position to say what that might look like.
Great, thank you.
How will the new grading system be more effective, and how will this support staff mental health?
We've already covered this, I think, but you know, it was fed back through the big listen about the impact of the overall judgment. So obviously we're removing that. Individual grades for each evaluation area means that settings are likely to have a mix of grades to show where the strengths are and where improvements can or need to be made. And this will be done through a process of working collaboratively with leaders throughout the inspection, from the very beginning, from the context call, throughout that inspection. And we really do hope that this supports settings to celebrate what they do well and help them to identify what could be better.
Great, thank you. we have covered CPD quite extensively so far, and I just want some clarification maybe just on this question. Do we need to do CPD for our staff? Obviously we've answered that, and we'd also want to see records of this, and I think you've pretty much covered that.
Yeah, I think what we can say is obviously continued professional development is set out, the requirements are set out in the EYFS, but actually what we're interested in is how leaders are identifying the support that staff might need to deliver high quality education and care, and the impact that support then has on children's achievements.
Perfect.
Right. Thank you so much. And then the last question, guys, you'll be very pleased to know. This person is a new manager in a setting, and they wanted to understand what can they do to gain as much information as possible about what to expect in an inspection. I know we covered some of that, so you can't prepare for it, but what can they expect during the inspection, and what are the main areas Ofsted are focused on with regards to management?
I think the easiest, we absolutely say don't prepare anything in terms of an Ofsted inspection, but actually everything we currently expect of leaders is published in the Early Years Inspection Handbook, which is underpinned by the EYFS and the associated non-statutory guidance. So would encourage this manager to go and have a look at the Early Years Inspection Handbook that's currently published, and also, am I going to plug again Sam's playlist on YouTube, because that also sets out in very small videos those key inspection activities that might be helpful as well. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Sam?
No, I just think it's really interesting because sometimes when we're at the curriculum roadshows, we'll ask people when the last time they looked at the inspection handbook was, and it's really interesting, a wide range of different periods that people, and sometimes people haven't read it within the last year and there could have been an update. So I would just say, the inspection handbook, the current inspection handbook, is for inspectors, and it's also for you as leaders, so that you can have a real understanding of what inspectors are going to be looking for on inspection. So it's all there for you. That really lays out what inspectors are required to consider in the judgments. So we don't have any secret hidden guidance for inspectors anywhere where we're telling them anything different. It's all there available for you in the inspection handbook.
And I think as well, the other thing to say as well is, being open and transparent about, that policy and those procedures, it's all there. And, since the appointment of our new chief inspector, we're going that step further in terms of being open and transparent by publishing the content of our inspector training as well.
Fantastic.
Right, thank you so much. And thanks again, Wendy and Samantha, for your time today. Thanks again, everybody, for your time and answering all the questions.
Fantastic.
Wendy and Samantha.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day, everybody. Thanks so much.